You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Ah, yes. Fall, that magical time of year when we begin to think about
timber.
A little bit of that, but we also think about exactly. We also start to think about, pumpkins and candy.
Hey, what's that orange thing rolling down the street? No, don't go out. You're not in the ice storm yet.
No, that's just Scott in an orange shirt, trying to skateboard again. He busted a wicked ollie. And then we have the gobble gobble feasting day. And then we have the man in the red
Turkeys
sleigh.
can fly.
Turkeys can fly.
In the middle of a hurricane.
Especially when you talk to WXKRP in Cincinnati. So, hi, folks. Welcome to another thrilling, exciting adventure of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. Exactly. Show 172. I remember the show at this time. I am Scott. I am the slapstick parts guy, currently on sabbatical, enjoying life and trying to do the best I can to stay busy and find little smaller projects that we shall remain unnamed, like the blinking light. Moving on from that, and directly across, sitting next to me with his most debonair radio voice would be...
Nobody here by that name. No, this is Kevin. How you doing? Sorry, the voice is a little off. Spent a couple of weeks up in New England. It was wonderful with my wife, except both of us kind of got our first winter cold in 20 years. So, and yes, we've been tested. No, it's not the flu. No, it's not COVID-19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, whatever. It's just an old-fashioned cold.
Yay.
Yeehaw. So I'm the engineer. I'm the guy who, reads manuals, as we've said before, uses the right tools, and most of the time follow the manuals, except when Scott comes in and says, hey, you want to try something?
Which usually ends up in a fire extinguisher moment. Not
yeah,
really.
But that way we don't have to have them recharged. We just replace them.
Exactly. And they're cheap now. I buy them by the gross.
Yeah.
So while we will share what worked for us as well as what didn't, see previous statement, it's always up to you to do your research, read the instructions, and please follow them and do what you want to your Jeep. Don't let anybody bully you into what you want to do to your Jeep.
That's right. Or doing to your Jeep what they want you to do, kind of thing.
Something like that. I need a flow chart. So, well, welcome post-Hurricane Ian from Florida.
Yeah, yes, and yes, we are still here.
Yes. Thank everybody who reached out and says, hey, everything okay?
Yeah, well, I wasn't here.
Yes.
Nothing like leaving a brand new home to the tender mercies of a Category 4 hurricane.
Yes.
And I'm very pleased to say that the design work I did with, and I got to give a shout out to Hulbert Homes and their engineering firm who worked with me on the design of my house, because we were only a couple of miles from the eye wall and my house received virtually no damage. My lawn, on the other hand, and a couple of the little trees that were planted are no more and will be mourned, and my internet dish was face planted like a bully slamming your face in your cereal bowl.
Quit hitting yourself.
Yeah. But it's all been brought back. And compared to those around me, we've had neighbors who had houses split in half by trees.
Yeah.
A number of trees down here is phenomenal. It looks like Uncle Jed's tree lot every 15 feet down the road as they wait for pickup from FEMA.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I have not heard of anybody in our general area who was severely injured. Yeah. Myself, cold be damned, I've been out there with the tractor and the chainsaw. We're working on the Methuselah's tree stump. My neighbor had a very large, probably 80-year-old oak come down, missed their house by the grace of God, missed their power line,
yes.
Likewise. And they did get it cut apart themselves, but they got down to the base, and I think the base was between 38 and 40 inches in diameter, and the trunk. And we went over and were able to break it free and pick it up with the forks on the tractor and get it back to a burn pile where it'll take probably the next 4 years to burn.
Yeah.
And then the stump, I've got a decent little tractor. Mm-hmm. It'll pick up about a full ton on the forks, about 2,000 pounds. And I picked up the back end of the tractor, complete with the weights, Yeah. It's like, I got scary. We finally got it pulled over out of the hole and took off all of the roots to the edge that we could, where I could just start to pick it up. We still have another couple 100 pounds to go, but it, all told, if you can do it yourself like that, you're way ahead of insurance and all those payments. So we'll get them cleaned up. But again, thank you so very much for everybody. who sent their concerns and their well wishes. It was deeply appreciated, and we are still here.
Yep.
The Jeeps are still functional. A little wet, a little windblown, but we're still here. So
Yeah, that's pretty. Well, I fared very well. I had my neighbor's tree behind me. Hey, Kool-Aid my fence, and missed my house by inches. But again, an afternoon with some friends and a chainsaw, we took care of that. I did have another thing. You talked about, the Jeeps. I jumped in the Jeep like 3 days after the storm, and I'm like, did I leave the window open? Why does it smell like cat pee in here? It was bad, right?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out the windowsill, of course, leaked, went under my rug to that silver heat stuff we had. And when that gets wet, guess what that smells like? Cat pee. So I had to cut it out, put new ones in, do all that. And now she smells great as an orange blossom because those are the trees I have hanging from the rearview mirror. But, again, just a tree down, and of course, we drug it out to the street,
this Technic segment brought to you by Scott.
Exactly. But I just, took care of that. And I'm happy to also report I finally got all the parts for the seat install. We'll get to that after a year. But other than that, things went rather well. If you follow us on social media, you can see I posted some pictures of the tree down and stuff like that. But again, we came through rather well. My neighbors 2 streets over lost power for a couple of days. I only had one blink of power. It was out maybe 5 minutes. It came back on, and
yeah, we were out here technically for about 26 hours. But that's one of the other things I added to this house is I put in a whole house generator support system so that I didn't even lose the milk in the fridge.
Yep.
It came on about 2 minutes into the outage, stayed on until they brought the utility lines back on, and then reset itself, and we're back in biz.
Yeah, so I had my generator and gallons of gas ready to go just in case, so I could at least keep the air conditioners and maybe a fan going.
Yep,
not air conditioner, but refrigerator. Yeah.
So let's enough about us. Let's get on to the important stuff that our listeners are asking questions about.
Well, one of the questions I asked about was my blinking light project, which we're gonna cover at a later date. But I tried to reenact the same thing I did with the Gladiator with the blinking lights.
When he hits the brake lights, if you didn't see his posts in Facebook, why not? But anyway, he added some European fog lights and then repurposed them as supplemental 4th and 5th brake lights.
Yes.
So when he hits the brake lights, the rear lights have a rapid 3 blink, slow 4 blink, and then come on and stay on as an attention getter to try and prevent what has happened to him a couple times, distracted people. Now they're going to be, oh, look at the pretty brake
bang,
lights. But he's trying, folks.
I'm trying. I-4 and all that, where I live off of, is known for that kind of stuff. So I was trying to reenact the same thing with the LJ, but
we will get there. But
we'll get there.
Folks, don't berate him. I am impressed as heck that he tried to do it without coming over here, hat in hand, going, "Can you make this work?" He at least tried. Yes. I'm impressed as all get out.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is I want to try and get back to building up that confidence, if you will. But again, it was a good time. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I cussed a little bit and threw a couple things, but
well, that's given. I mean,
well, and just so you do know, for a future reference out there, when you're using the heat shrink tubing things and all that, use the heat gun, because when you're like me, using a lighter, not one of the cool butane torch lighters, but a regular lighter.
How bad did you burn yourself?
It wasn't the burning myself; it was the melted plastic everywhere and the smelling of belted usual Scott electronics. And I'm just sitting there going, "Yeah, it's a little too hot. Cut, resplice. Let's try this again." I'm just sitting here shaking my head, folks, because it was one of those situations. I just knew better. I was in a hurry and didn't pay attention, and it's like, oh, really, Scott? Really, really, really. So so that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I'm again, a valiant effort was put forth. Unfortunately, the skills just aren't there yet. I mean, they're there, but sometimes you just need to go. I need an adult.
Yeah. Yep.
I can handle my own rotations well, but
Okay. Well, that's pretty good. Well, I got to chime in and give a shout out to all the people up in St. John's and Halifax, Nova Scotia, and St. John's, New Brunswick, Canada. That's one of the places Sue and I were up in, and they were just wonderful people up there. It was absolutely fun. Quite a bunch of Jeepers up there. Obviously, the different focus. Not saying there aren't those that go out for fun, but most people have them rigged up for survival.
Yeah.
None of this all-terrain tires, none of this mud tires. These are snow tires with studs.
With
and they're
studs, I was going to say.
Yeah, we're putting them on now. Big up to Halifax and Peggy's Cove, and just had a blast of a time. And some other places in the U.S. as well. We did Boston and Bahaba and, the like, and had a great time.
Did you get some chowder?
Oh, Susan chowdered out, both on clam chowder and seafood chowder. And I just sat there going, ooh.
Meanwhile, Kevin's eating his chicken tenders. I'm joking.
No, there was a little better than that. But it was beautiful. We were probably about a week too early for color change.
Yeah.
But it was nice to get away. On the other hand, you think, well, we lived in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and, Virginia's and been through New York, and not a big deal. And I about froze my butt off. I could have taken some heavier clothing, even though during the days it was in the 60s and 70s. But those 30-degree nights were a little much for this boy at this point in time. But
we had temperatures in the 60s and high 50s here.
Yeah. So, but if you ever get a chance to go visit those far-flung provinces, it is definitely worth it. They're just some really neat people, and it's out there. It's really... you get up to Halifax and you think, okay, it's a big town. It's a big shipping port. It's got a lot going, but you don't have to go far to get out in some of the most beautiful northern country. And the beaches are these rocky coastlines with the waves breaking. It's just gorgeous.
Nice.
It's gorgeous. And I'm going to have to, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I got to share a quote for you here.
Well,
here we go. This is a bronze plaque.
Okay.
Fastened to the the boulders of the beach. Mm-hmm. Warning: injury and death have rewarded careless sightseers here. The oceans and rocks are treacherous. Savor the sea from a distance. Now, this is in the tourist town that promotes its beaches, but this is on every entrance to the rocks going, you go down that sucker, you going to die.
This death begins here, and there's a nice little line in the sand. Oh, wow, that is beautiful. Yeah, Kevin should show me a picture. That is beautiful, man.
But we also got up to one of the neatest things I've ever seen. It's and I've read about it as an engineer and as just a traveler. The Bay of Fundy. Have you ever heard of the Bay of Fundy?
I've heard the Bay of Fun Dip.
Nope. That's what you had at the latest. What was it? All you can eat bar.
Something like that. Yeah.
The Bay of Fundy is up in the Canadian provinces, and it is a bay that narrows rapidly. And because of the islands and all that, when the tide rises there, it's got a 50-foot tidal change from high to low.
Whoa!
And there are boats in the Bay of Fundy. They're crabbers and fishermen and that kind of stuff. Let's see. Do I have anything on there? I don't think I do. Oh, yeah, there it is. Low tide.
Wow.
The boats go dry at low tide. They have, the bottoms of them have little structures that keep them from tipping over. And that's just life. If you don't get in before tide goes out, you stay out, and you come on in next time. And in that particular spot where we were, I think the tidal shift was something like 35 feet.
Wow.
And boy, when we came through there, when it was changing, also there's the reversing falls or reversing rapids. And we saw the reversing rapids, and they're 6 hours apart, but you see this, what looks like a relatively full river. There's an overlook, and you're like, oh, it's a nice look at the river, and right across the river is the power plant. Okay, that's really nice. Yada, 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 yada. And then all of a sudden you come back, and it's a roaring rapids going out. And a little bit later, it's a roaring rapids coming in until it fills up. And this is all with the tide. So enough of that. I realize that isn't Jeep stuff, but that's where I've been.
Well, the going back to the thing, we hope everyone in our listenership in Fort Myers and all those areas, did fare well about everything. And again, if you want to go out and help, I'm sure, a quick internet search will tell you who's hurting for what and how, where. There's a bunch of things trying to help out. So, keep that in mind. But as far as everything else goes, Kevin, I mean, I'm glad to hear you had a good trip. I mean, that's one of those kind of things. It's interesting. Didn't Fiona kind of go up there just recently, or another hurricane, or
Fiona was in front of it, and we got to see where Fiona basically. She kicked out after she did her thing to Florida. She kicked out in the Atlantic and actually managed to build some energy back up and then hit them up there again.
Gotcha.
And that was very close to the Halifax area.
Gotcha.
And predominantly flooding related, but there was some wind damage as well.
Gotcha.
So it's tough and yeah.
It's weather.
It's weather.
Yeah,
and you choose as your dangers where you choose to live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to go out and live on shaky ground, you can head to California and Utah. And, you know, you want to go play with lava, head out to Hawaii, you know. Down here.
That's hot stuff.
Yeah. Down here, we play with winds and water.
Mm-hmm.
So
and fire ants. So speaking of fire ants and Jeep stuff, I have nothing to really to correlate the two.
No.
But as with most things, I think we got a couple little. I know it's kind of a little early. You want to tip your tire into the garage real quickly?
Sure, let's go out there because we got a backlog.
We got a backlog. Yeah, we were on vacation, and you guys said, "Hey, wait a minute, we got questions." So we will be right back after this announcement. Hey, folks, as always, remember to check the On the Trail podcast page, onthetrailpodcast.com, and you can see all the old shows, the archives. If you want to send us a message, Facebook, that works great. 4x4 Radio Network, of course, Wrangler Fix, and all the other people that oh, my God, I just lost my train of thought here, but we're going to power through this. Again, we got the Patreon website if you'd like to donate to the show. And with that, we're going to tip your tire on into the garage here and let Kevin read some emails.
All right, folks. First one I want to touch with is an email.
Real quickly. Hey, a shout out to, we'll just say, Officer Hobstein, a good friend of the show. We saw him at lunch today. And,
we saw him, but didn't get a chance to talk to him. He was very diligently interviewing some lunch chow.
Exactly.
And, I'm not going to stand in his way, but he's a great supporter of the show, a good friend of ours. So thank you very much.
Just forgot to do that at the beginning of the show. Sorry.
That's Scott for you.
Exactly. So as you were saying, we got a couple of messages.
We did. And I'm going to start off one from Brian. And Brian's from Mobile, Alabama, a city I know well. Nice. Brian, yeah, that downtown Mobile Federal Building, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mobile District headquarters is there, and that was my command center for 14 years.
Wow.
When I was in charge of the military construction programs down here in Florida. So I visited there at least twice a month, and all the lobster shack out on the roads, and on the bay, and all the other great places, and just a neat town. Just a lot of fun.
Cool.
So anyway, Brian, he told us all about a little bit about himself, and that he's been a mechanical tech for 37 years, never paid anyone to do any work on his Jeeps, and he was talking about it. And his first question had to do was replace the manifold on his 98 Jeep TJ 4-liter from a $98 Rock Auto 3 months ago, and it has a crack in one of the downpipes yet again. And all I can say, Brian, is my sympathies to you, sir. I have yet to see a factory-style exhaust manifold, and we're going to get to that discussion in a minute, that didn't crack down in the lower Y pipe section, where 3 and 4 join into the opposite headers. Mm-hmm. And it basically, because you've got all kinds of motion, and that design from Chrysler, the factory one's cracked. And we have a friend who has his own shop, and Ron at Red Scorpion has welded and re-welded and re-welded and patched and braced and welded, and it just cracks. Yeah. It's a really a poor design. I really think Chrysler knew this, and it's why in 04 and later they went to the 6-into-2 format header as opposed to the 6-into-1, which your Jeep has. You can try other brands. I know there was a question about what we run. I run the Banks torque tube system, but it is specifically design. I do not know if they have one for your year, which is the 6-into-1. They have it for the 6-into-2, which is the 04, 05, and 06s. That one does not have signs of cracking, nor is it $89.
Yeah.
But, and so, yeah, you can continue to weld it up. It's mild steel, but it is going to continue to crack. I'm sorry to report that to you. Most of the earliers in both the TJs, the XJs, just about anything out there with that style of an exhaust manifold, they're prone to cracking. Really,
it's not
even thicker metal isn't going to fix it. It has to do with the fact that you have a Y connection where you get a wiggle on the one side when that pulse goes by, a wiggle on the other side when that pulse goes by. So you're literally not just flexing a paper clip, you're actually bending both legs at the same time.
On top of thermal expansion, on top of everything else.
And so I wish there was a better answer than that. There are other people who have converted to the later model. Okay, but
that was the question I was getting ready to ask.
Yes, you can. You can get a later style manifold, either a junkyard one, or you can get an aftermarket for 04, 05, 06. The downside you're going to have with that is, of course, it's fitted for two O2 sensors, and you'd have to know how to wire the two sensors together to get a joined signal, and that's not as easy as it sounds. It usually requires a small merger box, and then, of course, the lower pipe has got two precats on it that you don't have on yours, so you're adding a bunch of stuff. Somebody who has exhaust shop could probably come up with something along that lines, but that in itself is a little bit of a challenge. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, Ron basically welds it up once or twice and then throws it away and gets another $89 one and waits for that one to crack. Let's see. He had another question about an axle. He's apparently, I don't know what drove him to do that. Scott, did he say anything more to you?
Nope, I didn't see that in the email.
Basically, he said another topic, run out an axle. How much is too much? He says, I have about 9,000. See the photo. Is that bent? Well, first thing you got to do, Brian, is there's two axes of runouts that you're going to talk about. One is wobble or face runout, which is the one you sent me a picture of. And the other one is actual axle runout that you think if you're spinning a pencil in your hand, does it wobble? Okay. The other one is if you put a disc on the pencil, how much does the disc swash back and forth?
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe it with the terms unless you're used to them. One is equivalent to runout would be if you're old enough to remember a record. If the hole in the record was punched off center, the rim of the record would have axial runout. Okay, it would kind of orbit rather than spin smoothly in a circle. The other one is if you put it centered on the pen and then put a nickel under one spot on the record, the surface of the record would tend to go up and down. Or if it was a warped record, in the old days, you could watch the tone arm go up and down and the music go woo. Right. Now, modern day equivalents, for those of you who have never seen a record player work, I'm at a loss.
Yeah. We got nothing.
We got nothing here. But to answer your question, 9,000 is about 4,000 over. Factory service manual recommendations is no greater than 5,000 flange runout or axial runout, and you do have a bent axle. Not bent really far, but the other thing you got to realize is 9,000 at that rim of the face of the flange. Now put a 15-inch rim on it, and then put another 37-inch tall tire on it. What does that mean in terms of that outer tire wobble?
That 9,000 becomes a quarter of an inch quick.
Or even a half an inch very quickly, which you will feel. You will feel it will wear your tire. If it's in the front, you'll feel a steering shimmy. If it's in the rear, which it appears to be by the picture that I saw, you'll have a little butt wiggle. If it's strictly an off-road vehicle, you can probably get away with it with no problem. If it's your daily driver and you're running a die 4 like Scott's talking about at 70 plus, then you probably want to investigate in replacement axles.
Well, you also does wreaks havoc on the bearings because you're
wobble loading the bearings.
Well, not only that, also the shocks.
Yep.
If the tire is bouncing, it is oscillating.
Yeah,
it's going to cause a shock to oscillate in that one spot.
So.
Well, you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah, it's going to cause any vibration will work the shock, in small increments right there, which is really hard on it than the long strokes that it's designed to take. It's sitting there like buzzing in and out on the valves and buzzing in and out on the seals.
that's much better way to say it than I try.
Well, I understand.
A lot less clunky when you say it.
Now, what I'm going to do is segue here because Scott and I were talking about this, when we were grabbing our lunch. And we came into a little bit of a discussion. He looks at me and goes, you ought to cover that on the show. And so I hope you like this, folks. This is a little segue. And thank you, Brian, for the impetus for this subject. And that is terminology. What's the difference between a manifold, a header, a tuned header, an equal length header? What's all this terminology?
Isn't it all the same?
And the answer is no. And is it misused? Yes. Are some of them cross-used? Yes. They shouldn't be, but they are. All right. So let's start with the basics. A header. A header is a term, for those of you who spun wrenches, you remember the older GM engines? And you take a look at them, or Fords, and there was a log down the side with a dump either in the middle or the back. And all little straight stubbies came into that log tube and connected to the exhaust pipe. That is a header. Just like if you go into a plumbing area for a hot water system in floors and walls, you will see a header, which is the pipe coming in. It might decrease in size as it goes, but it's a log header with 90-degree tees or near 90-degree tees coming off to each one of the lateral circuits. It works the same thing. There's a header on the return flow, which each one of the individual return flows comes in and dumps into the same header. And it works okay with water, but even with water, it's not the greatest because you're impinging your flows without regard to any energy levels between them. So one flow can impede the other flow, slowing that circuit down. But that's what they made them in the older days. In the 50s, 60s, even 70s and 80s, you had true exhaust manifolds. Manifold being mini, and they don't flow real well. Now, they started trying to get a little smarter, which was to bring in out of the head of the engine and bring it in at an angle. Well, that'll make it better. We'll slide it in there so they all bevel together. Instead of taking a garden hose and trying to spray it straight into a pipe at 90 degrees and watching half of it go blowing forwards and backwards and, let's aim it so it goes downhill. That was an improvement. And it would work really well if the cylinders were sequentially fired. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But they're not.
Right.
Okay. They're mixed fire for a reason, to get the power pulses at 90 degrees through crankshaft rotations or whatever works. So you still end up with the opportunity of getting a power pulse, which is easiest way to think, just a pocket of high pressure. Think of it as a fuzzy ball of air, moving down the pipe.
Right.
And if there's a fuzzy ball of air blocking another pipe that's getting ready to fire out another fuzzy ball of air,
then fuzzy won't be very fuzzy, was he?
No, they just get squished.
Gotcha.
And they actually stall or slow or even backwards. You ever heard of backfire?
Yeah.
That's part of the saw. So they realized it just didn't work, but you know what the engine timing is. So you ought to be able to adjust the pipe lengths so that they can come together and one will follow each one in sequence like soldiers falling into line. If you've ever seen those marching bands where 3 and 4 and 5 lines come together seamlessly into one, that's what you're trying to get out of your exhaust system.
Right.
Because there's a lot of benefits to that. Number one, you don't have collisions, so you don't have pressure spikes. Number two, the gap between each power pulse is virtually a vacuum. And so if you have those lines of vacuums and the vacuums are going by the end of an open pipe, well, that'll put a negative pressure, which actually helps, and you've heard this term, scavenge the exhaust out of a cylinder. All right?
Right.
Well, therein came the header. The term header refers to the original was an equal length pipe from each cylinder to a common exhaust point.
Okay.
All right. And boy, that helped. That helped a lot. But it didn't negate the impacts. But the impacts were in these big, they were 4-into-1 tubes. And, you had these inch and a quarter, inch and a half primaries that came down and dumped into that 3-inch collector. There was room for everybody.
Right.
Well, not really, but it was better, And so you remember the old, headers that came down under the belly of the car, and the longer the tubes, the better they worked. Why did they work better at that point? Well, because the collision still happened down there at the actual 4-into-1 section, but the further away you got it, the less the impact was up the stream. So each pipe had its own rhythmic flow, and the collisions were getting far enough away that you weren't really having a big impact on the cylinder itself, each individual cylinder.
Yeah, there wasn't trying each exhaust port wasn't trying to stuff
the other ones.
Yeah,
and that was great. I mean, that was the 60s. I'm a child from that era, and so I remember the big headers coming down, and even the open tubes, firing out.
Well, I remember like a lot of times, going through the Summit catalogs, you'd see the hooker headers and stuff like that. And see, when I think of headers, I think like the ceramic coated hooker headers and things like that. Where there's long sweeping with big collectors under the bottom of the car.
And that's really what it was. It was a header for the exhaust system. It was the head of the system.
Okay.
And then in the 80s, as efficiency kicked in the early 90s, engineers started looking at the exhaust and saying, okay, how do I get this? I need to tune the damn thing so that it actually does what we want. They started looking at pulse propagation out of the cylinders. They started looking at times of flow from each pressure pulse. What was the decay rate? And they realized that the length of the tube wasn't important as they thought it was. What was important was the length. And that there was a magical series of links that would allow, the pulses to slide in behind each other like those marching band people. No collisions, no impacts. They just kept in marching sequence. And in fact, the one behind would push a little bit, and the one behind that would push and push and push. And you ended up getting a higher velocity in your exhaust flow. And you began to actually draw on the exhaust header system. Mm-hmm. And there we have tuned length headers. All right. And now, for example, looking at the issues that Brian was dealing with his 6-into-1, if you go look at Edelbrock Banks torque tube system, and even, let me see a second, I'm just looking here that Rugged Ridge has come up with their own version of that. Yes, they're quite a bit more. I'm not going to kid you. And they're 6-into-2, which is the later model. But they look like Twisted Cobras. Right. Okay, there's all.
Oh man, Twisted Cobras. Cobra's a bad, cool band name.
Okay,
sorry.
But what these do is they pack all of that technology into a very small space that fit in the cast iron area of the factory exhaust manifold, and they actually enhance the scavenging with provisos. You have to have. The exhaust has to match or exceed the flow rates. You cannot create an obstruction. You always want to move to equal or equal to larger. You never want to go, larger to smaller. And so people, you've heard me talk about my headers are sized to work with my Edelbrock head. My exhaust, my primary catalytic converters right there on the 2 go around, and that's a larger pipe with a CFM flow greater than the headers need. And then my exhaust is a Borla, which is equal or greater than the MagnaFlow front pipe.
Right.
And does it make a difference? Noticeably for this engine. Airflow is one of the 4 liters notorious problems. It does not breathe well. Mm-hmm. So what I have basically done is with ram air up front and an calibrated exhaust out, I have basically shoving air in and vacuuming it out within, a moderate degree.
Yeah.
And Scott will tell you, it stands up and runs.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a V8. Not trying to say that, but compared to other 6s.
Well, compared to mine. But the interesting thing when you talk about, because I remember a long time ago, when I educated myself a long time ago, I say, well, how much power will a bolt-on exhaust add? I'm like, well, it's not so much power as it's going to make the engine, it's going to help the engine breathe better, but it has to be in balance. You can put a high-flow catback exhaust, but if you're going through the same birthday cake straw for an intake, you're okay.
No
It might sound a little better, but to truly get the benefits of the exhaust, you need to have a balanced tuned system, which means the same garbage in is the same amount of garbage going out.
Actually, you need more out than in.
Yeah.
Because of combustion byproducts. But that's why, if you go back quite a few shows, we had a long discussion over the fact that Edelbrock produces a flow chart, comes with every head, and it tells you the CFM in and CFM out, cubic feet per minute. And then you should use, anytime you do that, even if it's a factory one, you should be able to get that information off a flow bench. And you should match your components, because you're going to find little things like I did, that the intake piping was deliberately constricted on the 4-liter.
Oh, man, that little,
38 millimeter diameter inside of that crossover pipe. I mean, I was asking that engine through a soda straw. And so opening that up to a true 3-inch intake, it really does. Now, here's the interesting thing. My off-throttle response is probably lags now about a quarter second than it did before. Because when you were in a smaller pipe, you had a higher throttle body, you have higher air velocity through that pipe at idle. Okay, so that when I push the throttle down, it would already be moving. Okay, but it really didn't make a huge difference because there wasn't enough room to move much. But now I've got a large available mass of air, but I've got to get it moving. And so I still have that, it takes it a second.
Yeah.
But when it gets rolling, look out. And you can tell the difference. What I'm talking about is that if you do from a standing start, I mean, she lifts the front tires. There's no question. I mean, off the ground, from in a turn, I'll lift the inside tire. But if I'm on the freeway and punch it, there's no loss. There's no lag. I'm sorry, is what I'm saying. It's just because I've already got the air moving through the ram air system.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a rundown on a manifold versus a header versus a tuned header. And obviously tuned headers are the best for your engine, as we've said, as long as you put the rest of the system in. Very rarely is there a single piece that makes everything perfect. It's usually, part of a system. And you're going to see it. I know you're going to, but look at the catalog here. It says manifold. Oh, this one says header. I said, yeah, I get you. I'm giving you the historical side of it.
Yeah.
Manufacturers are free. There is no federal purchasing board for exhaust systems.
Yeah, there's no nutritional guide on the side for the acronyms and nomenclature used. Quick question.
Yep.
Now, I'm a limited budget. And I actually even thought about doing this until we got the email. Dropping in a K&N filter, something as simple as that. Now, depending on who you ask, I've always been kind of just the paper filter guy because that's what the vehicle came with. And again, but everyone swore at these K&N filters when they first came out.
See, that's what you said. They swore at them.
Well, swear by them. It's true. People are either going to swear by it or swear at it.
I run one too, but I don't run it for that reason. I run a K&N because I can trail clean it.
Gotcha.
I carry the cleaning kit and find me a creek somewhere, and yes, the environmentalists want to scream at me. But if it's a choice of not going home, I can clean the thing. But, okay, again, if your paper air filter is your restriction, the K&N will work wonders.
Right.
But if it's not your air restriction point, and you're exhaust choked, you're not going to feel anything other than your ears, like you said. It's a great filter. I am not dissing K&N or any of the other cleanable filters.
Right.
Not in the least. They are good systems. They work well. I use one myself, but if I give you a soda straw sealed to a martini swizzle stick in the middle, you can suck on that straw all along. I can make it a 2-inch straw. As long as the middle's still a swizzle stick, you ain't getting much to drink, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. You have to look at the entire thing as in engine combustion. It's atmosphere to atmosphere. So from the air outside to the air going out the tailpipe, and the only way to really do that is with a manometer system. And some really high-end tuning garages have those, and they'll drill little holes and they'll stick little pressure plugs in there and they'll read, what it is. But you can usually tell, I usually do it by components. The reputable components, I can get the data on it, Banks is very open. Gale Banks is very open with his tech data. All right. He will tell you what his exhaust components are capable of flowing.
Edelbrock?
No. The one I just said, my front pipe. I'm having a brain fart here.
Banks?
No. Banks is the exhaust header. Isn't it great being old, folks? Magnaflow.
Okay. There you go.
They were very open with their data. Even if it wasn't on the website, I could add tech help and say, hey, what's the CFM rating on this? What's the max flow? And they were, in a moment, I got it back, like that. Same thing with Borla. These name brand companies are not trying to hide tech data because they're trying to build a quality exhaust. Mm-hmm. And they actually understand when you say, look, I'm volume matching my system. And they will go, oh, you're 1 in 1,000. Thank you.
Yeah.
Same thing.
You get it.
the intakes, what are you doing to, people will spot do it. Oh, I port matched. Great. What did you do with the rest of the system? For those that don't know, port matching means more grinding on your intake or your exhaust manifold, for lack of a better term, so that it matches the gasket and the profiles of the head so that you don't have any rough surfaces and impeding airflow.
Yes, I also know some people they walnut blast their
to give a
valves
texture
and all that kind of stuff
to clean them. So there's 1,000 things you can do for fractional horsepower. And if you're doing a quarter mile or you're running at Indy or you're doing King of the Hammers, God bless you. For those of us in the regular world, you're probably throwing your money away. Okay. On the other hand, removing obstructions, creating smoother flows, making sure that you do not have velocities that are causing erosion and turbulence beyond what you want. You want a certain amount.
Yeah.
That's part of scavenging and cleaning the cylinders out and getting fresh charge of air and fuel in. But
it's a balancing act.
It really is. It really is. And so generally speaking, I try to match the head because the head's where all the business happens. Mm-hmm. That's where the valve opens, the air and the gas go in, the spark plug goes kabang, and the exhaust opens, and you got to get it out of there as quick as you can because you want to get that fresh charge in. So if you match that, the dynamics of that unit, what they call a bench flow test of the head, if you can match to exceed that, don't exceed it grossly, but just meet or exceed, let's throw a number out there. I'll go on the fence and say, if you can get within 10% of the max value, you're going to notice it. You're going to feel that. You're going to have that. I've enjoyed it. People look at me and they go, wait a minute, that's a 4-liter 6. Yeah, mm-hmm. It is. What miracles did you work? Not really any miracles. I just part matched. Okay. I made sure the components met or exceeded the numbers I needed. And it took a little bit of time on the computer, and that's about it.
Yeah, no, and those are the interesting things that when we talk about projects, I can remember you bench built that a couple times in your head before you actually started assembling components together.
Oh yeah,
and so the things can be done because again, the biggest thing I had is when people, I want to add a cold air intake to my Jeep. You see that a lot.
Yeah.
And the cold air intakes have their places. To me, so you're running a little bit of a risk when it comes to off-roading.
Well, my answer to that, and because guys, if you've seen pictures of Slightly Altered, I run a snorkel. That's a cold air intake if there ever was one, sitting there about 2.5 feet above my hood. But one of the things that isn't dealt with in most cold air intake systems that you buy, some do, some don't, is how do you deal with rainwater? Because there will get rainwater in them.
Yes.
That's a given. You've got a snorkel. You got a big scoop out there going. Mm-hmm. It's about what mine sounds like, too.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you're going to get rainwater in, period.
Yeah.
Water and engines don't mix really well,
Nope. I know that for a fact.
Yes, you do. So I took it upon myself to design my intake system with about a 15-degree slope to the filter, so that water would hit inside the, an enlarged area where air velocity slows down, mm-hmm. would settle to the bottom. And then there is a duckbill valve, which is looks like a piece of rubber tube that's been snipped too hard and kind of flattened across the face. And if you squeeze it sideways like an old carton of milk, it pops open. And what happens with that is every time I move the throttle and you get a high pressure moment because I close the throttle plates, it spits out the water. Okay, it has a place to collect and it goes and spits out the excess. And so far, even with a garden hose poked down the thing, I have never gotten water into the engine. Is that a scientific test? No, it's a real life test.
Yeah.
However, if you have a snorkel system and you don't have or a fresh air intake or a cold air intake that does not have a rain deflection system, how are you dealing with water?
Yeah, because water does not compress.
No.
I was actually looking at the sprinkler systems. I'm just rolling with the flubs now. Sprinkler systems for the Gladiator and the Rugged Ridge one they have. It's very neat. Well, they have the little a valve that basically you get a piece of hose, kind of like your duct valve, but it's remote to where you can. They tell you if you're not going to be doing a water crossing, leave the valve open so that the water can drain out.
Yep.
Okay. Well, people complain that that defeats the purpose of the snorkel. I'm going to plug mine back up and I'm just going to run it like that, and then they wonder why the truck stalls during a hard rain.
Yep.
So
because if you're lucky, the filter gets saturated and can't flow enough air. If you're unlucky and the water gets through, well,
I've seen
what a bent rod looks like.
Yes, I do have it in the garage actually. But again, those things are engineered. A good snorkel kit will be engineered for them.
Right.
So another thing too is, should you face your snorkel forward or face it backwards?
Well, if you want the maximum ram air effect, it has to face forward, but you're also going to get the maximum water ram effect as well. So some people turn around backwards. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's lower. Contrary to popular belief, moving through the air pressure around that Jeep is not constant. If you bring that snorkel face down and face it backward just below the roof line, you're actually going to have positive pressure there because of the bulk wave that the Jeep is creating, that big burble of air pressure because it's trying to push it out of the way since we have the aerodynamics of a brick.
Yeah.
But if you turn around and have it above the roof line like mine is and turn it backwards, that's a slipstream going backwards. And then you're like, okay, I'm trying to suck in air against a Craftsman shop vac. Yeah. So I go forward with a screen in it. I have a pierced screen in mine that, yes, it does remove some forward airflow, but it also creates a stall space of air. It's set back in the snorkel. We're getting really deep on the tech here, folks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what people want.
It's a pierced screen that came with it from River Raiders, and you tap it in and you adjust it. And you want to set it about 3/4 of an inch back in, because then the back pressure created by the solid areas of the screen create back pressure. Which then goes down the holes like a drain, helping to offset some of the loss due to the screen. But there's more than enough holes in that screen. And when I call it screen, it's not like screen mesh. It's like pierced metal.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think like a strainer bottom, and it's got a bunch of holes in it. And it's a really good system. It does shed a lot of water too. A lot of the water hits that metal and goes sideways and goes around it. But what gets down there's a well in the actual snorkel that can hold probably a half a gallon of water. There is no drain for that. It eventually evaporates out. If I've been in a horrible rain, I will actually pull the vent pipe off and use a wet and dry vac afterwards to suck the thing dry, just so I don't have water sitting in it for a month, because then it smells funny. But in my case, it then goes out through a little Z-bend in the ducting. It's all soft with aluminum 3-inch couplings, and it starts to climb, that 15-degree climb. Scott, you've seen it before. And it has an expander that goes from the 3-inch pipe up to a 6. And there it connects to my Spectre housing. And the Spectre housing at the bottom of that 15-degree, right there at the bottom, is where a 1-inch rubber duckbill is put in there. And then the Spectre cone is mounted at the back side, at the exit on the high side, kind of pointing downhill. So it really sheds water down back out towards the outlet. And then from there, it just levels off and makes the crossing across the engine head to the throttle body.
Right.
And again, all clear 3-incher. Yes, folks, I did put my idle air temperature sensor back in its own little housing and all that kind of stuff. It's all factory computers, happy with it. But it is kind of neat that if you ingest a fair amount of water, if you're looking under the hood and you just kind of, when you hit the throttle down, Of course, when the throttle blade closes, there's still air moving in the intake system, and inertia carries on, and you get a little back pressure, which is all it takes for that duct valve to go, and it literally spits a stream of water out. So if I'm in a really bad rain situation, I will deliberately dump my throttle every once in a while just to force the thing to flush itself out.
Yep.
So, and again, remember, if you change the factory system, you have to know what the impacts are, and you have to adapt your driving conditions to what you built.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's what we also kind of say, start small.
Start small. I guess I'm past small now. Let's get on here a minute here that we've got Sean. Mm-hmm. And not sure where, well, I guess he goes by Kirby. Sorry. He says he's got a 2016 JKU Rubicon Rock Hard with 109,000 miles. And past few days after first cold start in the morning and then maybe an eighth to a quarter mile of driving, it has twice suddenly bogged down and died. Another time it didn't die, but it jerked and the RPMs dropped suddenly between gear changes. When it has died, it cranks right back up, and after that, it only happened on the first cold start, never any other time. And I watched trans temperature, and it seems to only happen when it's under 100 degrees, sometimes low speed, slight lurching, bouncing RPM. This is in fourth to fifth gear on 1,000. Bounce maybe around 3 to 5, accompanied by a sound similar when you downshift and the engine brakes in engine RPM. But this is caused, basically, he says, got any suggestions? And I do.
We got lots of suggestions.
Yeah. My first suggestion is pull your idle air motor and clean it. When the idle air motor is colder and it's not warmed up, it's slower to respond just naturally because it's a little electric motor like it's in a slot car. It's not like a massive motor. Yeah. And it's controlled by the ECM that can only pull tenths of an amp kind of a thing. And if it cannot react to your shifting or whatever, which, you know, you're driving along, there is no choke on your electronic fuel-injected vehicles. There is nothing as a mixture control other than the computer adjusting the duration of the pulses on the injectors and the idle air motor. Mm-hmm. It's what is supposed to, basically, if you're old enough to remember older cars that weren't running right, and when you were starting them and they were cold and they start dying, you just keep kind of playing with the gas pedal and then blah, 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 and you're adding air, but also adding fuel with the accelerator pump. That's what the idle air motor does. It's a little pin control unit, for the better way to think of it. You've got a little. Some models had a plastic. Some models had that looked like a little arrowhead, except it's a round arrowhead. You know, like a pointer in a Windows.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Your combustion here.
Yeah, and that little shaft is free to move in and out, but not rotate. And the end of it, there's a screw hole with threads, and there is an electric motor that the shaft of the motor has a screw on it. And the motor turns one way, and an arrowhead moves in, closing off a hole. If it blows back, it opens up the hole, letting more air in. And if it does not react in time to compensate for falling RPMs, your engine will stall.
Yeah,
it is most commonly happens when they're cold. I've had the problem. Scott's had the problem. Mm-hmm. Most of my friends have had the problems. Sometimes it's not cold. Sometimes it's corrosion. The little green TJ that kept having trouble, the idle air motor was completely corroded to the point that the motor could not turn the little valve assembly. It was a relatively inexpensive, meaning it's under $100. In most cases, it's under 50. Single connector, single bolt removal. And you can look in a service manual and you'll see we're an idle air motor. The other thing you can do now, since yours isn't dead, it may not be corrosion. It may just be gummed up, particularly at 109,000 miles. If it's never been serviced, consider pulling it off and cleaning it up with a little bit of brake cleaner. My one thing with that is after you've cleaned all the brake cleaner stuff off, so let it sit out in the sun for half an hour, because you really don't want to have that brake cleaner in the system. Mm-hmm. I have seen, and I'm not trying to scare you, but I have seen with these cheaper electric motors that have brushes in them, and you clean them with brake clean and then put them in, and so you hear this boom, and you look down there and you've let the magic smoke out.
Yeah.
So I do let them completely air out for about an hour. You had a comment, Scott.
Well, yeah, I did, because when we had the JK, when we hydrolocked it, we didn't know we had kept having that that cylinder, number 6 cylinder misfire. Well, I took the throttle body off, and the back of the plate was all carbon and cummed up. So that's when I got
carbon and gummed up.
Carbon and gummed up.
Yes.
I told you I'd go with the flubs. So I got the throttle plate cleaner.
Yeah.
And you remember that with a toothbrush, and I just cleaned that out, and she idled great after that.
Yeah. So that's another thing you can check if you want to dig in that deep is you can get in and clean the throttle body properly. It could be gummed up. At 109,000, you're due for a little bit of TLC on that intake system. Now, there's could have been a host of other things, honestly, but I know the idle air motor and the gummed up throttle plates typically do not trigger check engine lights. They just leave you with a mystery of, it doesn't idle right.
Yeah, well, that's where you should start. You always want to start small.
Well, as I start small and cheap or free and work your way up.
One thing he didn't put it in his email, whether or not he got a thing of bad gas. If you got a thing of bad gas, could that cause it?
It could, but define bad gas. That's
water in the gas.
Huh?
Water in the gas.
Well, probably not. That water in the gas will cause problems at just about any RPM.
Okay.
All right. Now, if you've got gas that's been contaminated with other combustibles that wouldn't cause it, it can cause bad idle. Usually, if your grade of gasoline is approaching kerosene as opposed to gasoline, it will cause that. And believe it or not, that has happened. There has been kerosene mixed in with gasolines when it was supposed to be mixed in with diesel fuels, and unscrupulous dealers, by the way, folks, don't know it. If you have a diesel in cold weather below the average temperature, I think of 45 degrees, they start to cut the diesel fuel with kerosene to make it flowable so it doesn't turn into diesel jelly in your tank, which it will do.
Diesel Jelly, another good band name.
Oh God. And kerosene got mixed into a tank of fuel. I remember reading an article about this some decades ago, and the guy went ahead and tried to sell it. And some cars burned it just fine. And some really had a heartburn with it, literally.
Quick, pour in the Nexium.
Yeah. So
my car runs on Pepto. Oh God. Heartburn, nausea, indigestion, diarrhea. Sorry.
Now you're going to owe another.
Yeah, I know. I owe Johnson & Johnson or whichever company $1.
So I think we've probably wound this wormhole about as deep as it can go. If it goes any lower, we're going to start seeing lava and magma come up the
red hot magma.
So anyway, again, I've got to say thank you to everybody who expressed concern and wanted to know how things were going here. We are going well. And as always, we're going to recover. It's just...
It's part of Florida living.
It's part of living in Florida. You help those that got it really bad. And I'm a little cynical, having worked emergency response for over 20 years. And I see people, it's like I might have a comment for some of the folks. It's like they're called barrier islands for a reason. And you want to go out and live on a barrier island. Maybe not the best life choice unless you're a billionaire and can afford the loss. And like I said, that sounds very cold-hearted, but I don't want to build my house in the middle of a railroad track either, but I like the view, So, no.
Well, our heart goes out for you.
It does. And I'm the one out there hauling debris and cutting up trees. And, it's just like, oh boy. But not everybody's an engineer. Thank God for that. Because we're crazy people as it is. Crazy enough. We don't need any more of us. We're dangerous.
Yeah. Well,
mostly to ourselves.
Or when you go to build a project and it's like the doghouse can survive a zombie.
And what's wrong with that?
Fido's safe.
Yeah, but, exactly.
We do have a couple events coming up. We wanted to just remind people of Florida Trail Team Challenge is always still looking for teams. There's a couple spots open left. And also we're coming close to the season of Crawling for the Fallen. I'm sorry, Chrissy. My mind just went for a minute. But Crawling for the Fallen, again, we're going to...
Celebrates all of the fallen first responders.
Yes. And there are quite a few.
And when I say celebrates, memorializes. Probably a better way.
Well, it does...
celebrates what they gave for us.
Yes. And it also helps bring some
closure.
Closure, but a sense of community with the survivors. You know? That's why they have the concerns of police survivors. That's the cops, the thing they donate to. But there's a couple of events coming up here real soon. Again, Kevin and I hope to be reading the names here really soon. I got to send Chrissy an email. Chrissy, if you're hearing this, go ahead and send me the email. We can chat on the phone. But other than that, we got some other shows coming up here really soon. We still have a docket of people we need to talk to.
We do. We've got a lot of people that have talked to us with a lot of neat event centers and a lot of products. We're trying to get everybody worked in here, but obviously a little vacation for me and then a little bit of Mother Nature, doing a little house cleaning on the state did kind of put a dent in things.
Yeah.
But as always, we appreciate you all for listening. I do think, Scott, we're finally done with the public service announcements, so we can put the Jeep in four-low, lock the trails, and all that good stuff like that. So, words, brain, function not.
I'm on functioning on 4.5 hours sleep. Kevin just came back from a cruise. He's still on the healing upswing, I guess you could say. So it's been fun.
Yeah, don't blame the cruise, folks. It wasn't the cruise where we caught the crud, but it's just. It's one of the reasons I hadn't said cruise because people are like, oh, it's a cruise. No. But we have.
Whoops.
That's all right.
Cat's out of the bag.
No. Well, I wouldn't keep a cat in the bag anyway.
But it's lying pointy side up.
That's the best way. No, we look forward to getting on with the rest of the Jeep events and all that stuff going around here, as well as answering all your questions that we can. And I really appreciate them. And thanks again to the folks that took a few minutes to send us a quick message. And
I'm even going to be sending them stickers because they came up with some great show ideas.
They really did. And as always, we've said it for many, many years now, this show is much yours, maybe more so than ours. Without your input, without your ideas, without your questions, we wouldn't have a show. So appreciate anything you want to ask. And if it's not too personal and not too offbeat, and I feel it has value for the rest of the Jeeping world, we'll be glad to cover it.
Absolutely. Yeah, like the one person who asked us that one question concerning macaroni and cheese, squirrels, kiddie pool, and cream corn wrestling. We didn't answer that email. But with that...
Scott did personally, though.
Yeah, moving on. So with that, we're going to say, as always, wheel legal, tread lightly, take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail, because we want to keep these trails open for our kids, and children's kids.
That
kids,
works
kids,
for me.
And stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. So... We'll talk to you later.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.